What I'd like to do now is begin the afternoon with an introduction to our keynote speaker. I first learned about our keynote speaker when I was on the website at Georgetown University. They have what's called the Red Door Series. It's speakers that they invite to Georgetown and they give presentations. And so I clicked the link because there was some mention of this Experience Institute and I wanted to find out more about that. And it was talking about taking a gap year, going to, I believe it was in Chicago, where you would be given the tools, work with mentors and collaborators, and just take some time to pursue a goal or a dream. And I thought, what a great concept. And who is the person that would actually make an institute that helps somebody do that? Well, you can imagine how thrilled I was when, a couple of months ago, we were in the stages for planning this institute, or this symposium, and I get an email from Anne, who's at a conference, and she says, I think I've just found the keynote speaker, and his name is Victor Saad. And here I am today with the great pleasure of introducing Victor as our keynote. So just a little bit of background. In 2012, after working with high school students and middle school students, Victor decided that he was going to consider the option of doing an MBA. But the timing didn't seem right, and the options that were available and the cost just seemed to get in the way. So what did he decide to do? He decided that he would design his own master's program, and he called it the Leap Year Project. So he undertook 12 projects in not in 12 years, in 12 months. And at the end of this, he staged his graduation at a local TEDx talk, talking about his experience. And he also published a book on the number of people that have undertaken educational opportunities and taken risks to do this. So after doing this, he decided that he would launch the Experience Institute. So this is an organization that helps colleges and college and career professionals take a bit of time and undertake a short-term, real-world experience that they wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity to take. This experience has led him to collaborations with Google, with Berkeley, with Leo Burnett, with Stanford. In 2015, he was inducted into the Forbes 30 Under 30 group for his work in education. And in 2017, he joined the team at Stanford School of Engineering as a lecturer in design, where he helps students reimagine their learning through experience. So please join me in welcoming Victor Saad to the stage and presenting our team. Thank you, Victor.
It's great to be here. So yeah, as she said, I'm Victor. It's really great to be here. It's been fun to rub shoulders with some of you in some of the sessions, or just in walking through the hallways and just kind of hear some of the things that you're all interested in. I feel very honored and also very humbled to be in a place like this in front of people who've spending their entire lives in this space, and I'm also really inspired by it. So this is also how I feel like I feel sometimes in these spaces. Lots of good things going on, but maybe a little too much sometimes. So, so before we go any further, I actually want you to just do a quick roundtable discussion on two things. Why'd you come? And what's been the highlight of the morning so far? So the why and the high, just to sip your wine a little more slowly than Amy Schumer. And then we'll go from there. All right, go for it. All right. Okay, so just in the nature of just bringing a room of people together a little bit more, even though I hear that a lot of you already sort of know each other from just the community here, still bringing a little closer together on today. Anyone hear anything that was sort of helpful, inspiring, or either a why for why somebody's here today, or a high from the morning? And just you're going to shout it out. Yeah, go on. Anyone, you can just go for it. Yeah, how creative some of the instructors are being. That's a high for sure. Also, I learned that today was the day you legalized cannabis. I hope all of you just got a kick out of that. Why and high? That was so perfect. I didn't even plan that. I wish I did. Anyway, that's my high. Not that you legalized it, but anyway, moving on. What else? Go for it. Cool. Yeah, just a chance to get to know some of you, some of the people in the room a little better. How about you? Yes, who think similarly around people who think similarly about the importance of great teaching. Great. Any last one? Anyone on the tip of your tongue? Anything? Go for it. Yes. Yeah, that's great. Great artists steal, and so do great educators. That's great. That's awesome. So she sat next to someone who is doing something exactly like what she had wanted to do or is wanting to do, and now is going to be able to apply that to her setting. Great. Cool. So a really quick summary of today, a short talk, we'll do a Q&A at the end, and then drink wine like Amy Schumer, and also maybe, I'm not going to even say it. All right, so this talk is called Learning by Design, and this is sort of where I started. These are my parents, Dr. Megdi and Isa Saad. Moved here from Cairo, Egypt, had an arranged marriage. But what you can't tell in this photo is that whenever I was in middle school, they had a really messy divorce. And my heroes became my teachers, my youth pastor, my band director, my soccer coach, and everyone around my sort of educational community. And then when I went off to college to study education rather than become a doctor, lawyer, or engineer like everybody else in the Middle Eastern community, and like what my parents had sort of begged me to do or expected me to do. And what had happened is in our small little town, some of those same educators were also just really involved in one another's, their students' families' lives as well. Started counseling my parents, and 7 years after their divorce and some great community coming around them, my dad calls me and says, "I have the good news. Mom said yes," and my parents were remarried, and this was after they got remarried. So for me, education has this like really sweet, much larger role than just teaching content, and I think it does for all of us in this room. But this was my introduction, right? Was seeing what it did for my family, and so I went off and I worked with middle school and high school students in the west suburbs of Chicago. This is one of our sixth grade sort of orientation. We're all about to do a night tag game. Fire is involved as usual. It's great. But as you heard, I was about 5 years after that, starting that role. We had helped build a student center, $4 million, 40,000 square foot student center, and it was funded off of philanthropic dollars. And I was like, hey, this is cool, but how do we make things like this that are sustainable, that are actually financially viable, that don't necessarily need donations, but they actually create value and also do good in the world? So I was going to get an MBA, decided Northwestern, University of Chicago, my backyard, social enterprise degrees, but they're expensive. So 2011, put up a website called Leap Year Project, explained that I was going to design my own master's through 12 projects in 12 months, and that you could subscribe at the low, low price of $10 a month to hear my story, to like sort of sponsor a funky project, but also to hear the stories and get connected to other people interested in this like education through experience space. And sure enough, a couple hundred people, it took me a few months and a lot of convincing, a couple hundred people subscribed, and they were also the people who helped me think about what projects I should do. I asked, hey, if you're interested in design, if you're interested in entrepreneurship, if you're interested in social impact, and you know a company or an organization who would let a kid talk to them about their challenges and find a project, let me know. And people started introducing me. Now the projects ranged all across that sort of those triangles: design, business, social change. And from a design standpoint, worked with an architecture firm for the first time in my life. There's a young man named Samuel Stubblefield let me help design an installation for Microsoft's healthcare facility. It was such a cool little project, 4 weeks. I helped do research around a new gum flavor for a company called Project 7, which does everyday products and gives a portion of the profits to 7 different causes. This was really fun because I was getting these like silver packets of powder. All these drug and alcohol references, I gotta stop it with this talk. This is more positive. I helped organize Thanksgiving dinner on Skid Row, downtown Los Angeles, one of the largest homeless communities. And these are just 3 of the dozen or so projects. The cool part was that community grew and people wanted to take leaps of their own to learn, to grow. So I created a place where you could post what leaps you were taking. And then by the end, there were people had done everything from health and wellness projects to volunteer projects to starting businesses to investing in their family by changing how they were how much time they were spending at work. It was all like a mix of sort of learning and social impact and sort of personal projects that were really sweet. So my final little event was to put this book together of all those stories. It sort of became my self-made dissertation. Like, this is what I did, why I did it, what I learned, and here are the people that I met along the way. And then I needed a place to talk about it all. And like, as you heard, there's a TED Talk in Chicago, TEDx Windy City, and I put a cap and gown on and graduated. It was actually at Northwestern's law school, 700 people. It was awesome. I graduated on the Northwestern stage. It was fun. So this is where it ended, though. It was like, okay, I had several job offers, but I also had this looming question over my head is how might we establish experience as a credible form of education? 2012 was the year the first massive online open course was released. Stephen Thurn, Stanford, 75,000 attendees or participants. But 2013, literally there was an article that said, 2013, the year the MOOC died. And because it was like 3% completion rate. Everyone's like, well, shoot, this isn't it's not alone, it is not a silver bullet on its own. Of course, the MOOC hasn't died, but it was just one of these, it led to this question because it's like, okay, I had this amazing experience. How do we think about scaling it and offering it to people of all shapes and backgrounds and so on? So Experience Institute became the place for that conversation. And we started with something relatively simple, a post-college alternative to grad school. Instead of 12 projects in 12 months, it was 3 fall, spring, and summer experiences. And there were classes before and during, or before and after each experience. So it was sort of like a mix between Harvard and the Amazing Race. Like that was the sort of idea. And then at the end, there'd be a big party called Expo where people would give their talks and show what work they had done. And people did all kinds of things. And we ran this for 4 years. People worked at schools, they worked at architecture firms, they worked on farms. Some of the companies and organizations came through our network. Some students were like, hey, I'm gonna go after this crazy thing. And we're like, all right, here's how you do it. Here's how you do a project proposal. Here's how you set up your portfolio. Here's how you have that initial conversation and blah, blah, blah. And it was just us kind of building off of what we had done. And thankfully, there was an amazing group of educators who were circling around this idea, who were giving me insights and feedback, because I don't have a formal master's in education or anything. And even my undergrad was more in this sort of faith-based world, and I had never built anything like this. So people were supporting that along the way. We taught 5 different things: storytelling, self-awareness, community building, business operations, and design thinking. Those were the classes we taught in the spaces throughout the meetups. And then we also launched a part of our company that works with companies, helping companies do 60-day projects where they get to sort of experience something new by designing a project or experience either inside the company or even outside the company. So mixing sort of sabbatical and passion project and company innovation all together in one group. Now, all of this, okay, if that's the introduction, all of this has put me right here, like literally like right in the middle of academia and industry. And for the rest of this talk, we're going to talk more about the academic side and about a simple process that we use for designing learning. Now, this is how a lot of students come into the world after college, or maybe when Yeah, they're like junior, senior year. Okay, go get started down your path, says the world. But I don't know how to do anything, and I don't have any connections, and I don't have any money. Yeah, you're super impressive. Yeah, shit, it must suck to be you. And a lot of students, this is how they feel at the end of college, or within that first year of college, is that they're sort of paralyzed by the fact that like there isn't enough in their repertoire to really launch. Now, this idea of designing learning is sort of similar to cooks versus chefs. We love this idea that we want students to be able to take the ingredients that life gives you and be able to cook new or to create new meals, not just take learning off the shelf, not just sign up for a program, not just get a degree, get a grade, check things off the list that you've done everything right, but that you actually see new ingredients and you mix them all together and you think about your career that way, you think about your life that way, you think about your next step that way. And by doing so, we create people who are confident problem solvers as they navigate a world where there are more transitions and more problems than ever before. But what does that really look like? And that's where we've sort of spent a lot of our time. So discover, prepare, act, share is a really simple process we've been using around Experience Institute to help people design their experiences, design their learning. And we're going to go through each of those now. So discover. Choose a mission, not a major. This phrase actually came out of a project I'll talk about in a moment called Stanford 2025. We'll get there in a second. But choose a mission, not a major. So students have a ton to sort of navigate. All of us do, right? How do we want to spend our time? What kind of career do we want that's going to give us the quality of life we want? What kind of impact do we want to make in the world? Who am I? How do I want to show up? How do I want people to see me? How important is that to me? All that's enough to make a student just hyperventilate. So let's start real high level, real wide. Problems make people. Just a really simple tool for self-discovery. First of all, problems. What frustrates you? When you wake up in the morning, are you frustrated that your blanket's not heavy enough? Are you frustrated that your toothbrush isn't shaped correctly? Are you frustrated that the person down the street doesn't have the same things you have? Are you frustrated that when you go to school, it's not affordable for some of the people who it should be affordable for? What frustrates you? When are you in your element? What things, when you're doing it, you just lose track of time. What are you good at? Are you good at building software? Are you good at making great experiences? Are you good at communication? Whatever it might be. And then people. Who do you hope to work with? Educators, veterans, designers, developers, those in third world contexts. Who are the people you want to work with? That's the good stuff right there. So that gets just 3 simple questions, and now students are able to start thinking a little bit more clearly from that discovery level about what kinds of things they might want to be doing next, what kind of projects or experiences. You can't always have all 3. Sometimes you take 2 because you're really interested in the problem. You're not going to be able to do what you need to make, or you're not going to be able to make what you want to make, but the people are awesome too. So okay, fine. Go to that next. Let's play in this space then for now, and continuing that way. Now, in this whole discovery place, and as I was getting started in working on all of this, I met the folks at Stanford, like I mentioned, and they had done a 1.5-year project around the future of the university. And the future of the university is obviously a very grand topic, but they broke it down into the specific areas from res life to the library to onboarding and offboarding to experiences. So thinking about every aspect, and at the end came up with 4 provocations. We're not going to go through those provocations now. There's a beautiful website, but one of them was this idea of taking loops instead of cramming all of your education in 4 years. Another one was the design a mission, not a major. And so it felt really in line with a lot of the work we were doing, and that's why I've been spending my time out there. And one of the mentors and sort of folks who are kind of thinking about the future of the university is a fellow named Bill Burnett, who wrote a book. First, the class is the first thing he started with was Design Your Stanford, which was a freshman class helping students break out of this idea that they had to just check all the right boxes during their 4 years of college or 5 years or whatever it might be. And then it became Design Your Life, which became a series of tools and concepts that help people design their next step. So Bill and I got along really well. This is great. Problems make people, discover, prepare, act, share, design your life. So what we decided to do is think about experiences as something that need on-ramps and off-ramps, not just like beginning and end of classes and then, go in your thing. So we created a series of workshops that help students before they go either into a summer or into a gap or into whatever other experience that's not going to be just a classroom experience. And we walk them through some of the very exercises that lead them to designing their experiences with companies, with organizations, or things that they themselves want to get done. So student discovery, self-discovery is a starting point that oftentimes gets rushed past, but we focus really hard on it. So, okay, then prepare. So projects, not positions. How do we help people think about not just taking on a role or an internship, but we help them think about pursuing time-bound or projects where they're solving real problems? Now, a lot of you here probably know this idea of zone of proximal development. Everyone has 3 zones: their comfort zone, their learning zone, and their panic zone. Just kind of a rendition. And we love this spot, the place right on the edge of panic. This is where most of your learning is going to happen, where you want to rush back to the comfort zone, you want to let go of the wall, you want to return to mom's living room, you want to get back to your dorm room with your hot pizza and your fresh popcorn and your video games or whatever it is that is your comfort zone. Not that was mine. And you don't, and you stay there. That is the learning zone. That is the best part of the learning zone. And we like calling that the leap from your comfort zone to the edge of panic. Now, a leap for us means short actionable projects rooted in a question or a curiosity, what we talked about in the discovery. And we wondered, we can't walk everyone through every one of our workshops. We can't walk everyone through every one of our concepts. So maybe we could at least get them to start talking and thinking about it. And so a couple years ago, we just put together just a few simple worksheets that were in a nice yellow envelope. Did 200 of these, and we took them to a couple of different settings: classrooms, workplaces, so on. Stanford let us do some experimentation there. Everyone had one of those leap kits for 30 days, and they had to design an experience, 30 days, something that would take you from your comfort zone to your learning zone, and then you had to share it out. And it went really well. And so we decided to lean into it a little bit more, and we made something called the Leap Kit in 2015. It sold 1,000 of these in 30 days to different educators, workplaces, and so on. And now this is the sort of discover, prepare, act, share that I've been sharing. And it's really nothing more than a map, sort of poster, and a field guide that walks you through that poster. But these workshops, once again, this leads to those students. The whole purpose is to design a 90-day experience, whether that's your summer, that's a quarter, semester, and it takes you through these steps in a way that gets you to the place where you're thinking about concrete projects, not just like, I want to go work for Google. Okay. What problem do you want to solve, right? Going back to getting to that idea of, it's not about getting a position, it's about getting learning to get projects. This is also really in line with the future of work. A lot of companies are offboarding this idea, are sort of moving away from the idea that every time they have a challenge, they're going to hire a new full-time person. More and more, we're seeing this idea of like a gig economy is, you might think of like Uber and TaskRabbit, but think about 2.0, like where it's a network of people who are really talented at their thing. They're great designers, they're great facilitators, they're great communicators, and that person has multiple clients, and one of them might be GE, one of them might be Google, one of them might be a startup, and one of them might be a side project. Over half of the workforce will be a gig worker by 2030. And if we continue putting students in a place where they think they're going to have a lifelong career, we're not setting them up for the future. We have to help them think about, how do you navigate in and out of projects where you can add value, where you can learn and grow, and where you can package that project, show what you did, and share it with the next person that you're going to work with. Now, another big key component of all of that is you can't do it alone. You got to think about who are the people that are going to be around you. Sometimes we've called this a personal board of advisors. Sometimes it gets a little too heady for students that are like, I have a board of advisors. Like, it's a little scary. But no, like, the idea is a group of people, your inner circle, your outer circle, the people that care about you and care about the same problems that you're interested in solving. We made a super simple, just like worksheet to help you think about it, but this is there's no rocket science here. The idea is that when you have those people in mind, whether it's a family member or it's an old teacher or it's an old colleague or friend or whomever it might be, what is it that you're going to do then to connect with them? So we help everyone create an online presence for themselves as a starting point. You know, the victorsaad.com or whatever. This one is one of my students, April Sotarman, where it's their portfolio. There's tons of ways to create portfolios now that are super simple, that don't need a whole infrastructure. Squarespace or WordPress or, so many little tools. And all you need on there are your top past 3 or 5 projects, a bio page or an About Me page, and a way to link over to your other sites. And that's it. And that's the starting place for your portfolio. Now, it takes a little bit of finessing, but then the next thing after you have that is where are you going to post content, where you're going to share things out, where you're going to connect with that community. It might be a newsletter, like something that gets sent out consistently. It might just be a blog on Medium, which is a great sort of WordPress-esque kind of setup where you don't need any development skills. You could literally just start writing. But when you write, you just email those friends. Hey, this is what I'm learning right now. This is what I'm up to. And that begins to develop and foster a community in a way that by the time you graduate, you know some of those core people in your life and world. So we call it communities and rhythms. So discover and prepare. By the time you know some of the things you're really interested in and what you want to go into, some of the kinds of projects that you might do and the people you might that are going to be in your world, then you have to think about what you have to think about sourcing experiences. So the ACT phase. So from student to problem solver. So problem solver is someone, again, tied to that project, but you have to still think about what does it mean for me to actually talk to an employer about this idea that I'm not necessarily looking for your internship role. I'm looking for to design my learning by solving problems. It's a little reframe. Look, here are 3 ways that we've seen students do this. So for one, student designed. So if a student has the means or has a connection and they don't even need you, it's totally fine. Let them go for it. One of my students had a connection in the Philippines after doing hurricane relief, and they were working on an eco-village, basically villages built out of mud and trash. And he was like, I'm gonna go there. I have a little bit of savings. They have a little bit of their grant funding, and it's enough, and I'm gonna do that, and that's my experience. That's gonna be my thing. Awesome, great. The other idea is short-term projects. Or micro projects. So talking to companies about that problem and then asking them, can you do is it okay to try to do something in 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks? A lot of people are like, wait, what value are you really gonna add in just 4 weeks or 5 weeks or 8 weeks? But time out, it's all about scoping. Right? There are lots of consultants who will come in for a week or 2 weeks, and it's not what we're saying students are, but it's all about what's the problem at hand and how much time do we think we need to solve it. Not, I need a 3-month intern. That's a very different framing. And so sometimes you're right. A company might just need some user research for a new toy they're releasing, and they just need you to do that research, synthesize it in a beautiful way, and give it back to the design team because they don't have a design research team. Cool. How much would you pay for that? I don't know, maybe $1,000. Awesome. Can I apply for that? Great. Yeah, let's do that. Can you send me a proposal? Which we talk about proposal writing ahead of time. The last thing is the most traditional, which is going to be short-term roles. And even short-term roles, whether it's an internship or co-op position or what have you, how do you help the student think about it, not just by applying for the position, but actually framing it that you're going to solve at least 1 or 2 main problems, and you want those to be clarified ahead of time, so that way students are they're starting off with that sort of focus and intention. Now, this is obviously a challenge we see often. I want to get to X company or organization, but the reality is this is what's available. And it's just about filling up both of those sort of pipelines, if you will, like helping students do respectable, good, solid reach outs, and also helping them build that initial community. If they're doing it together, if people are making those introductions, you find that there's more and more of these boxes become tied in together. Now, most recently, I've been thinking about this at Stanford for junior product design students. So product design is a pretty vast, like there's so many different cool careers you can go into, but it's also can be really nebulous. So what we're gonna do this summer is we're gonna take about half that class, about 30 or so students, and we're gonna help them design their summer in a different kind of way. So normally they're aiming for like the flashy internship, but how do we help them reframe the summer to be maybe a couple of projects, 2 or 3 different projects, maybe one main project and a couple sub-projects. So we built a simple site where students and companies can go. Students apply to be in the program. So from the get-go, it feels like something different. It's not just like a career center internship program, which there are those, and those are great. This is just a reframe to see if we can help students think a little differently. And then companies can also go. Companies can create projects very quickly, and post those projects. Students see what projects are available, can click into that project, and then when they click connect, they're not necessarily applying, they're just showing interest in the project. And then once that form gets sent, the employer gets to see it. They're like, hey, X student is interested in this project, here's who they are. Company gets to click on their LinkedIn profile and their portfolio, all of which has been done in the workshops that we've done beforehand. And students can now begin to see how they could design their summer based off of a myriad of short-term projects. And these are only, of course, the projects that we curate, but students might be able to find several others. The idea is reframing the summer to be something you design, not just an internship you consume. Okay, so discover, prepare, act, and then finally share. So stories, not lists. And this is something we all inherently, or innately, we understand the value of stories and the sort of the challenge that just having a resume can create as far as trying to differentiate yourself. Again, not saying that resumes are bad. I think everyone should have a resume. It is what you, like the baseline. But how do we help students become storytellers, especially if we're talking about experiences? Things where change has happened, transformation has happened, challenges have been overcome, failure, success, and so on. So during the whole experience, students have to connect regularly. So we do every other week, they connect just on Zoom calls with a coach or an instructor, talking about what have been the highs, the lows, the things they've learned. And then also, they're challenged to reflect. Remember earlier, if you have a portfolio site, one of those links that goes out should be to where you're sharing your reflections. And then finally, at the end, we do either videos or talks. And I'm going to just show you actually one of the capstone videos for someone who did the full year-long program. So they did 3 experiences in a year. And so you're going to get to see sort of how, and she made the video. We do one of our workshops is on how do you tell good stories and capturing. And so you'll see a lot of her own footage here. So this is April.
When I started my year with Experience Institute, I knew I wanted to become a better designer. I've learned that the best designs succeed when strong ideas are clearly communicated. So, this year, I wanted to get better at developing and expressing ideas. I began by working as a project manager for Dojo, a Chicago-based web design and development agency. For the first time, I had to communicate with clients throughout the entire design process. After gaining valuable experience as a project lead, I felt confident to take on my next term in Seattle. I teamed up with an interdisciplinary team, Studio 7, within the architecture firm and BBJ. I was able to design experiences for civic and corporate projects. I also composed sounds for spaces and helped define the role of sound as a medium in architecture. For my last term, I was back in Chicago with Leo Burnett's Department of Design, doing creative strategy for an arts education campaign. I then joined the architecture firm Late Design and arts agency and a public storytelling art installation. Together, we worked on all aspects of the project from researching diagrams to designing the physical form, audio, and user experience. My undergraduate degrees were in architecture and music. It's not a typical combination, they were both of my passions. When considering careers, I thought I would have to limit myself to one or the other. This year proved differently. I got to work on projects that let me exercise everything I've learned. I was pushed in new creative directions that stretched me to design in every medium, from graphics to sound to strategy. I don't have to fall into one bucket or the next. Rather, I can show how skills from both worlds make me a better designer and teammate. This year has helped me own my role as a designer and given me creative confidence for going ahead in my career. I've been told, don't study design, study life. But I'd say, don't study it, experience it.
So, and then if, with some of the other students that we just ran a pilot, we just finished one of the summer pilots just in September. It was actually our first one in a formal university context. And instead of videos, they did 4-minute stories, so summer stories. And they presented their stories to the next class. So that was a really simple, also nerve-wracking for the students. They had to give 4-minute talks, but yeah. So discover, prepare, act, share. Now, employers are students too. If we're talking about the future of the workplace, we have to help our employers think differently about how they work with our students. We can't just focus on students. So we've been writing and delivering workshops for employers that help them think about how students are coming into their spaces. How do you onboard? So we take employers through the LEAP map as well for themselves, also thinking about what leaps they want to be taking, just to have that common vocabulary. And then, if you can imagine this on a big pad, every time a company wants to start a project with a student, they can sit with the student and just think, okay, what are your business needs? What are the challenges? What are the students' learning goals? And what are their assets? The project there in the middle, and then just some core questions. What are the potential challenges of getting this project done? What are the resources we have? What are the company norms and expectations? It takes 20 minutes, and the project starts off on a much better foot. And you could do this every time a company needs to start a new project with their employer. If they do weekly check-ins, or they do every other week check-ins about how the experience is going, they can always pull this right back out. It's just a goal sheet, but it just is a common starting point. And you all can make probably something even better than this, right? Like knowing your companies, or have your organizations speak into it. What things do they want to make sure that they talk about with their students every time? Okay, last thing here is just like, when do these experiences happen? So I'm coming in from outside the academic community, so for a while I did it just as a post-college. I mean, sometimes people did it as a gap year before, during, or after. Now I'm working more with academic communities, so at Berkeley we're about to launch the Experience Lab, which will be a post-college program, and it'll be for any time within 5 years of graduating, you come back, you do the meetup beforehand, you do an apprenticeship, and then you have job support, so an alternative grad school. At Stanford, we're thinking about during the college experience, can we do it, right now we're trying it with the junior, in between junior, senior year, and in between your first and second year of grad school. We're hoping to get to the place where people can do, we won't call it a gap quarter, I'm not a huge fan of the word gap, lots of reasons, but we'll call it a design quarter, or a leap quarter or something, or up to a full year away. I think there's room for this before college too, but it gets a little bit more complicated with 17 and 18-year-olds than it does with 21 and 21-year-olds. Woo. Okay, so I'll end with this. In times of drastic change, it is the learners who inherit the future. The learned usually find themselves equipped to live in a world that no longer exists. If there's anything that's driving this learning, it's when I look out at the world and I see how complicated and complex it is, and how complicated and complex people are. The work we're doing is the work that's it's going to help students navigate those complexities. And the opportunities that they have to gain experiences with support and community around them now is what leads them to be the confident problem solvers when they're faced with those seemingly impossible challenges. Our students will be the ones that inherit the future, because they will know how to learn and how to continue learning. Cool? All right, that's it. Yeah, sure. Yeah, happy to. So we have time for Q&A.
I'm going to ask you a question which might shake things up a little bit.
Sure.
How do you deal with failure
Yeah,
in your projects? Because I think for some students, like that video was very inspiring,
sure.
but the reality is a lot of students won't have that experience.
Yeah.
Some people are going to get stuck. Some projects are
Totally.
going to fail. What do you do? How do you
Yeah.
turn that into a teachable, learnable experience for the student?
Yeah, and by no means have all the students who've gone through any of our work for programs like all succeeded. And I think the combination of community to support them in the moment. So one of the things we did early on was we had a resident counselor, like in our little small pilot of a program, because students were changing the 3 most stressful things about your life: their location, geography, their careers, and relationships were often changing drastically, which are the 3 biggest stressors. So there wasn't even just like external failure; they were going through a lot, right? And I think a lot of college students, the numbers around anxiety, depression, it's really sad. So I think community is a key component, and thinking about what supports you're offering there. The other piece is the reflections, right? The share outs. Even through failure, there are lots of things you can learn, and to frame. We do this exercise where there can be a lot of mess ups in this little game, and every time you mess up, you're supposed to go, ta-da! Yeah, but just like getting them to think about failure not as a failure. Actually, the way you're supposed to learn how to juggle is to drop a ball over and over again until you're numb to the feeling of dropping a ball, so that it's not as big of a deal. Because what's happening is you think that dropping a ball is a mistake, but it's not. So some of that is in the community, and some of it is helping them see the challenges, the stuckness as actually some of the best parts of their experience. I think that's my 2 cents. But I feel like a lot of these questions will probably get answered different ways throughout the rest of the day. Go ahead.
When you're talking about community, how much of the community is an online community versus an in-person, face-to-face community?
So the in-person community is typically for sure the students and the instructors, and then beyond that, it's up to the students. Like if students are building a community where a lot of their friends or family or colleagues or old friends or whatever it might be are at a distance, then it's going to be more online. But we try to, even with the way we're framing the summer for the students that I'm working with right now, you're joining a cohort, and even though they're in the same degree, they don't necessarily know each other really well. So there'll be 40, I think, is where we're landing, and then even in there, we'll break them down into smaller pods, and that'll be your core crew. That's the one who you're jumping on Zoom calls with, or you're meeting with after class to talk about your proposals to different companies and so on. So it's probably mostly in person, and then it's up to them on how much they want to keep in touch with other folks online.
Thank you for the great talk. I'm an undergraduate student for some context, and I was wondering, there's a lot of students who are very clearly strongly motivated to take on these kinds of experience and pursue learning, but how do you convince more students or change their mindset to kind of grow into this kind of mindset and this kind of attitude than just go through the motions of learning?
Yeah, it was funny. I didn't expect that, actually, getting into the academic context. I thought the student part, people would just get real excited about it. But I had students email me and be like, hey, I sent your packet to my parents, and they just kind of want me to have a traditional internship. What do I tell them? I'm like, wait, what? And then other students who were like, wait, am I going to get enough money? Am I going to get enough experience? Is this going to be good? What if I fail at a project and all that stuff? So I think the biggest reminder to students is some of the future of work components that I mentioned earlier. It's sort of a chicken and egg game when you talk about experiential learning. Do you need the experiences and the companies first, or do you need the students to believe in it and to really go after it first? And it really is sort of a tandem thing. But when we have companies come in and talk about their experience with students for short-term experiences, that's is really eye-opening to the student. It's like, oh, okay, so you had Paricha in there for 5 weeks, and he did that user research project, and you were happy with it, and you paid him? Huh, cool. Yeah, I can get behind that, and then that's how my career might end up being in the future, like doing shorter-term projects for a period of time. That helps a little bit. So I think getting employers behind it is one way. The other thing is, I'm not anti-internship. I think the idea of throwing your resume at a bunch of things and hoping someone takes you is a little bit, is where I get worried, because that's a tough way to walk through the rest of your career and life, and oftentimes leads to a lot of mistakes, I think. And I work with students who are under-resourced, who don't have lots, who are coming from backgrounds where they don't feel like they have a lot of access or a lot of confidence. And so some of that is like get in the workshops beforehand, helping them see that, hey, this isn't that different. We're gonna position you as somebody who's gonna help solve problems and be a good question asker, and then walk into these projects. So it's not a privilege thing either. I think it is also just an honest reframing about how you walk into careers, and more importantly, how you walk into onto a team to find the right problem to add value to. So there's a training thing that I think helps them get over the hump that this is just some flashy way to do a summer, I think. So, yeah.
Hi. Thank you for that talk. It was inspiring. It also made me feel super old, because a lot of those people who are the instigators and mentors and stuff in my life are like retired already, which so in terms of old school versus new school, a lot of the time we take it as a given that collaborative work and teamwork is pretty much the only way to operate now. Yeah. This also marks the year where Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch guy is retiring. And I was reading something in the New York Times this morning about how he preferred being Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch because they didn't interact much with other Muppets, mostly with the humans, but not other Muppets. And that suited him great, because he didn't like other people that much. So my question for you is, with this context of joining a team and having a cohort and having all these helper people, how do you work with people who are brilliant kind of loners who can actually add tons of value through a leap experience to some of these companies, but don't actually do that well in collaboration? What do you do in that case? Have you worked with any?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think to just specific scenarios. I think most of the students who've come into my programs honestly have been okay with that collaboration. They sort of self-select in. I think last year was the first time that I found a couple that were like, I don't want to do the workshops. I don't want to do that kind of stuff. So we leaned more in some of the one-on-ones. I worked with them on which workshops I thought were the most important and which ones weren't. So those two people did some of they just completed some of the assignments around making sure they had a portfolio, making sure they knew how they were going to show up with proposals and how to talk to companies, and they just did some of the one-on-one check-ins on what they were going to do. And then at the end, they had to do the story. So I guess what I'm saying is the framework can be applied to a bunch of different kinds of people, and at least that's what I think, from what I'm seeing so far, that even the shy person needs some support on what discovery looks like. They need to prepare. They need to be in that sort of scenario of a few different projects, so act, and then have a way to help them share. And I think if we can, it's less about extroversion, introversion. It's less about even social ability. I hope that doing this sort of opens them up a bit more if they're in a caring community as they do this. But even if they're not, it's a framework I think students can apply despite where they're coming from, in that context. Does that make sense? Yeah. But I appreciate the question. That's very empathetic of those people. I appreciate it.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. You had me at the Venn diagram that you put up there
Oh, yeah,
and kept me
problems.
with designing your life. I love both those things.
Yeah, yeah.
Fantastic tools.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
thank you. And I actually also did a similar year to you a few years ago. And so I think what you're doing, to be honest, with the Experience Institute and beyond is a really powerful thing. I don't know that maybe because I've experienced it myself, but I think when we think about the future of learning and programs, I think we're going to go well beyond the undergraduate, master's, PhD type programs and beyond what some of the fantastic things happening at the college level too. So my question to you is in terms of your own perspective with Experience Institute and some of the fantastic collaborations with D-School and Berkeley, do you see this as being the type of model that fits well as a complement to what's already happening in undergrad? Because I noticed like you've shifted from kind of being outside of that to collaborating. I'm sure there are lots of reasons for that, but what do you see in terms of the future vision for Experience Institute and these types of programs more broadly?
Okay. So she asked, how does this impact sort of the future of kind of higher ed as a whole, and yeah, beyond the collaborations. Yeah, I mean, I still have some work to do to figure out exactly like. I mean, my like ideal world is this idea that you have this budget of years to spend in higher education. So imagine you're given 6 years. And there are like sort of a few phases to higher education. You get to start by poking around at a lot of different topics, but then you go to work once you kind of find a couple things that you're interested in, and then you come back and you get more into it. Yeah, and this is also Stanford 2025, we called it looping. But the idea of cramming all of your learning into 4 years of education is like me saying you're gonna work out for 4 years and be strong for the rest of your life. And that's just not true, you know? And that you're gonna know how to work out forever. You're gonna know a lot about how to work out, but there are gonna be so many new things about how we're evolving, and you're gonna wanna stay abreast of those things. So, okay, how about if I go back for 2 more years? Well, yeah, that's great, but like, that's still not it. So I do wonder, you know, way out there, this idea of looping in and out of the university. The university is more of a hub. Degrees are sort of a thing, like a 4-year degree is a thing of the past. Also thinking about yoga studios, right? What about learning studios that you can sign up for that are run by universities? And you have a subscription to those studios. I think that's a sort of a crazy idea that for the future, not coming to some big campus, but actually going down the street to continue your learning that you're designing. Those were a couple of thoughts. I mean, as far as EI goes, I think where we're at is we're just going to keep pushing towards more space, and our mission is establish experience as a credible form of learning. Classroom just continues to be above experience. The amount of time, money, effort, celebration, credibility, like all goes here, and then very little goes here. Even in co-op context, there's a lot of money that gets placed here, but as far as it's a portion, and it seems like a secondary kind of thing. And from the folks I know in that space, they're sometimes even having to fight for helping students see the value of co-op to the same level as in some of the classrooms, not just a checkbox. You know. Yeah. Go for it.
Hi. Thank you so much. That was fantastic, Victor. Quick question, and you don't know the world anything, but what you guys are doing is so fantastic. I think of students at Harvard and Stanford and Waterloo, even if they just have an utterly mediocre, uninspiring experience, they're going to be just fine. Does the Experience Institute tap those kids who didn't, beyond the shy or perhaps more introverted students? What about the students who just didn't follow the rules, they're not headed to post-secondary? Sure. They're missing you. Can you get to them?
Yeah, we just started doing something in high schools. So it's our nonprofit work. We're working on getting our 501c3 right now. EI.org is hopefully what it'll be called. But where we're helping teachers do sort of community-based projects, capstone projects in under-resourced communities in urban environments and rural environments, which are typically the ones who don't necessarily travel off. Look, like we're like this opportunity right now seems so ripe, and just figuring out like sort of what to do at the right time. I was super, I mean, cards on the table, like I was super ambitious as a 26-year-old trying to start this, and it was almost stupid. Like it was like, I had no credibility. I had really few connections. I had one good year. Like, I was working with 11 to 18-year-olds a year beforehand. Like, I gave a TED talk. So what? Like, what was I thinking? I should have actually like done a little, not should have. I'm glad I am. But now it feels like work with a big public institution, work with a private institution, pilot there. It's slow-moving stuff. These pilots might take a couple years, but as we figure out the research, the resources to then help state schools or community colleges or high schools think more differently, that we'll have that credibility to walk into those spaces and hopefully have more resources to do so. So that's how I'm thinking about it, almost like, if you know anything about Tesla, they released like the really expensive 2-seater, then they did the $75,000 sedan, and then now they're doing there was like the 2.5, which was the SUV, but then now they're doing the $35,000 car, right? So not quite following that script, but there seems to be something powerful in that to getting the word out.